Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 7th Annual Evening with Neuroscience, hosted by Gray Matters Journal.
Gray Matters Journal is an undergraduate neuroscience journal dedicated to making neuroscience accessible to the public, regardless of educational background. An Evening with Neuroscience is our flagship event, and this year it will be broadcasted via YouTube Live on 4 consecutive Fridays at 5 p.m., starting today.
We begin our interdisciplinary journey with the field that first allowed us to study the brain and continues to revolutionize neuroscience today, engineering. Beginning with Dr. Fatma Inanici, we'll understand its tangible impact in aiding spinal cord injury patients, helping them to heal and return to normal function. Then Toma Itagaki and Pierre Karashchuk from UW Synaptech will show us neurotechnology in action, demonstrating methods that they have piloted themselves.
During the stream, we highly encourage you to ask questions via our YouTube Live chat feature. Each participant who asks questions will be entered into a random drawing for one of our raffle prizes.
Thank you for your attendance, and enjoy your Evening with Neuroscience.
Okay. My name is Fatma Inanici. I'm an MD, PhD, and working as a postdoctoral fellow at Moritz Lab in University of Washington, Electrical and Computer Engineering. Thank you for inviting me to speak. This evening, I will talk about a novel treatment approach, which is non-invasive electrical spinal cord stimulation strategy for restoration of hand and arm function after spinal cord injury. I will start with the outline of my presentation. First, I will briefly talk about the current state of spinal cord injury treatment. I will continue with the purpose of this study. Next, I will talk about the study design. I will then present the results of this study, and finally, I will finish my presentation with conclusions. A spinal cord injury is regarded as one of the most catastrophic injuries. It results in paralysis of the extremities and also multiple organ system dysfunctions, depending on the level and severity of the injury. Spinal cord injury affects an estimated 500,000 people each year globally, and the economic burden of the spinal cord injury to the individuals and the society is quite high. Injuries of the cervical spinal cord are the most common type of injury that results in tetraplegia. Tetraplegia means all 4 limbs, both upper and lower limbs, I mean hands, arms, legs, feet are paralyzed. More specifically, incomplete cervical injury is the single most common form of spinal cord injury, accounting for 47% of all injuries. The target of our research study is this population. Complete injury means there is no sensation or muscle control below the injury level. Incomplete spinal cord injury means there are spared sensation and muscle control to some degree below the injury level. Loss of motor control and sensory function in the hand and arm is particularly devastating aspect of tetraplegia. It results in marked limitation in the ability to perform activities of daily living and impairs quality of life. And not surprisingly, restoration of upper extremity function is consistently rated as the highest treatment priority among people with tetraplegia, almost 5-fold higher than any other function or condition included in the surveys. Spinal cord injury is currently incurable. Rehabilitation is the only available treatment to enhance function and independence. Traditional rehabilitation approaches are mainly concentrated on compensation for the loss rather than restoration of the function. However, newly developing techniques are quite promising to restore function after spinal cord injury. These new approaches are guided by the principle of neuroplasticity and neuromodulation. During the 20th century, it was widely believed that after maturation is completed, nervous system becomes a hardwired structure with fixed neuronal networks. Since then, this dogma has been overturned by a huge body of research, which shows not only the nervous system can change, but it changes continuously throughout life. In response to everything we do, every experience we have, such as training, even response to injury. Understanding neuroplasticity opened new windows for developing restorative therapies for many neurological disorders, including spinal cord injury. Now we know that spinal cord has remarkable neuroplastic properties. Additionally, we learned that some parts of the spinal cord, which are called central pattern generators, have automaticity for certain movements in the absence of brain control, supraspinal control. All these evidence triggered the research studies that focus on uninjured circuitry below the injury to promote functional recovery. So, task-specific rehabilitation therapies were developed for activation of spinal cord pathways. Besides automaticity of certain circuitries, even more impressive observation was that these circuitries can be used to generate voluntary controlled motor tasks when they are adequately neuromodulated to a critical level of excitability after spinal cord lesions. By targeting specific nerves, neuromodulation strategies either inhibit or stimulate nerve activity to achieve the desired effect using electricity or chemical agents. A combination of restorative therapies are also under consideration. The rationale for the combinatory treatments is that each therapy independently may not be sufficient to reverse the paralysis, but when combined, they may have synergistic effects to enhance the outcomes. There is growing evidence that electrical stimulation is a potent neuromodulator that can restore motor function after injury in both animal models and human subjects. There are different methods to electrically stimulate the spinal cord. These are intraspinal microstimulation, epidural stimulation, and the third one, non-invasive transcutaneous stimulation, which is developed recently. Although the mechanisms are still unknown, stimulation likely modulates the excitability of the spinal networks so that these networks and the motor pulse can become responsive to the weak descending drive after injury. As a consequence, stimulation can enable volitional control of movement, even in people with clinically complete paralysis. To summarize, the current state of spinal cord treatment, existing treatment options in the clinical settings are quite limited and largely ineffective. For that reason, restoration of upper extremity function remains an important clinical goal. This is important because it's the highest treatment priority of this population, and even partial recovery of hand and arm function could dramatically improve the independence and quality of life for people with tetraplegia, and decreases caregiver burden and decreases direct and indirect costs, so that we focused on potential treatment options to restore upper limb function. We conducted a prospective open-label two-intervention arm study to evaluate the functional variability over time and to control learning effects on the outcome measures. We repeated baseline measurements 4 times once a week without any intervention. Intervention arms or treatment arms consisted of intensive upper limb training only and transcutaneous electrical cervical spinal cord stimulation combined with training. Participants involved in training-only sessions in the first month, followed by stimulation plus training with the same schedule and training protocol in the second month. Next 2 months, both intervention arms were repeated. The order of the subsequent treatment arms was randomized. The reason for this alternation sequence of treatment arms was to understand more clearly whether stimulation is contributing to the observed improvements or the improvements simply accumulating over time. After 4 months intervention phase, participants were followed up with monthly visits for 3 months in order to document the long-term persistence of functional gains without further treatment. Intensive upper limb functional task training protocol consisted of repetitive activities of gross upper limb movement, isolated finger movements, simple and complex pinch and grip performance. Transcutaneous cervical stimulation was delivered using an experimental device developed for this purpose. This device is not FDA approved yet. It's experimental. Electrical current waveform was either monophasic or biphasic. Pulse width was 1 millisecond. Burst frequency was 30 Hz. The unique feature of this waveform is that it has a 10 kilohertz overlapping frequency that can selectively block pain fibers in the skin, so that it's possible to increase the amplitude of the electrical stimulation that can reach the spinal networks over the skin without causing any pain or discomfort. We typically observe enhanced volitional control over weak or paralyzed muscles between 40 and 90 milliamp stimulation intensities. Stimulation parameters were readjusted as needed throughout the intervention phase of the study for each participant. Stimulation was delivered for up to 2 hours during each session. We used 2 small surface electrodes as cathodes and 2 rectangular plates as anodes. Cathode electrodes were placed midline on the skin of the neck, one above and one below the injury level. Anode electrodes were placed symmetrically over the iliac crests. Our primary outcome measure was graded redefined assessment of strength, sensation, and prehension, shortly GRASSP test. This is a valid and reliable measure that has been developed specifically for quantifying hand and arm function in tetraplegic population. It has 4 domains, which are measurement of muscle strength, sensation, qualitative and quantitative prehension. Our secondary outcome measures included physical examinations such as standard neurological classification exam, modified Ashworth scale for quantifying spasticity. Spasticity is a high muscle tone that occurs after spinal cord injury or central nervous system injuries. Performance-based secondary outcome measurements included pinch and grip force measurements, spinal cord independence measure, and quality of life questionnaire. All participants improved in primary outcome measure, which is GRASSP test. Here are cumulative improvements in GRASSP strength and prehension. The mean increase in strength of 10 muscles that we tested was 4 points by training alone. Stimulation paired with training resulted in additional 10-point increase and the difference between training alone and stimulation plus training was statistically significant. Similarly, all participants improved significantly in their GRASSP prehension scores at the end of stimulation phase compared to training alone. In this video, you will see the water pouring activity as a part of quantitative prehension subscore of GRASSP test. At baseline, before we start stimulation, the participant was unable to grasp water bottle. After 4 weeks of stimulation, when stimulation was active, he was able to grasp and position the bottle. And at the end of 5th week of stimulation, he successfully completed the task as his power grip and coordination improved. For some participants with incomplete injuries, the effect of stimulation started very quickly. We observed a very dramatic improvement of hand and arm function as soon as we turned on the stimulator. This video shows a rapid response to the stimulation. This participant had spinal cord injury 12 years ago. He was not using his right upper limb for any daily activities. During training alone, function of his right hand did not improve. But on the first day of stimulation, he was able to pick up and release ping pong ball easily. Let's continue with the cumulative improvements in pinch and grip forces. Transcutaneous stimulation resulted in notable increases in both grip and pinch forces. As summarized in the figure slides, the magnitude of functional restoration resulted from stimulation paired with training was really impressive. In the next video, I would like to show the functional restoration was not only immediate and remarkable, but it was also progressive and long-lasting. On the second day of stimulation, this participant was not able to pinch half-inch diameter marbles before the stimulation turned on. After a few minutes of stimulation, however, he was successful in picking up this size of an object for the first time since his injury.
Oh yeah.
The audio captures his reaction and excitement to this rapid improvement.
Let's slow down a little bit. I'm acting like I'm a pro at this, huh? I'm just holding it and open it. Wow.
Helping, yes.
Oh
this
man.
is 45. Let's go with this one. If you can
gosh, I was just with any kind of pain. This is amazing. Wow. Like the other ones, like if I can get them, I'm like, they're just barely slipping out of my fingers. I can barely do it, but that's like a pinch.
So
that was really cool. Yeah. She can crush them. Wow, that is really, wow.
His pinch performance continued to improve, and he could pick up small beads by the end of the stimulation treatment, and even after 3 months of follow-up without treatment. Another beneficial effect of stimulation we observed was on muscle tone. In this participant, high muscle tone in the finger flexor muscles made it impossible to open the participant's hand to grasp objects. Training alone did not reduce the muscle tone, and she was still unable to grasp 1 each wooden blocks. Starting from the first week of stimulation, the participant experienced gradual reduction of spasticity that allowed her to grasp and transport 1-inch blocks. Several days later, she could also grasp and release these blocks with much greater precision. And additional stimulation enabled her to open her fingers and the thumb a greater distance to grasp 3-inch wooden pegs. The participants experienced other improvements as well. These include improved control of bladder function, better thermoregulation, and normalized heart rate. Additionally, participants reported improvement of trunk stability, better stin balance, and increased sleep quality due to reduced nighttime spasms. Functional recovery is not only facilitated routine activities of daily living, but also allowed some of our participants to resume their hobbies. This participant was able to return to oil painting 5 years after her injury. The next video will show another exciting outcome of treatment with transcutaneous spinal stimulation. This participant was playing guitar before his injury. He told that after a few years of injury, he tried several times to play guitar, but each time he failed and felt frustrated. After he started stimulation, the rapid recovery of fine motor control of the fingers encouraged him to resume this hobby. Let's watch him.
Yeah, just like I focus and work at it for an hour. You know, it's like we can strum it. Right. And we can get that movement going. It's like we can't do it right now. So I'll just sit there for like a half hour and just like pulling it down. That's why that particularly that's better. Just do it over and over and over until it starts to get a little better. Yeah. And that's how we even got here at all. It's like we do this and over and over until I could get it. It started like I couldn't even make the sound. I couldn't push it out hard enough. You start to get it, and start to do other ones, and pretty soon the chords start to come together. And I started to be able to play them on the neck. Which that's like all those fingers like working together.
His joy of playing guitar is really rewarding to watch. Our results show that transcutaneous spinal stimulation improves upper extremity function in incomplete tetraplegics. It enables volitional motor control in paralyzed hand muscles. The discovery of long-term recovery of hand and arm function without further stimulation provides strong evidence of neuroplasticity. Overall, this study provides evidence that transcutaneous electrical spinal cord stimulation is a highly promising intervention for people with cervical spinal cord injury. The advantage of non-invasive nature, I mean not requiring surgery, can accelerate its translation into clinical practice to restore long-term function to people with hand and arm paralysis. This is the end of my presentation. I would like to acknowledge the support I received for this research. First of all, I thank to Dr. Chad Morris and all members of Restorative Technologies Laboratory. My research was funded by Center for Neurotechnology and Washington Spinal Cord Injury Consortium. Most importantly, I would like to thank to our study participants and their families for their motivation and dedication that made this study possible. And thank you all for listening to me this evening. I will be happy to take any questions you may have.
Okay, we will be reading some questions from the YouTube chat for Dr. Inanici to answer.
The first one is this treatment available for all spinal cord injuries or only some types?
Except complete injuries, we continue working on the therapeutic effect of this study. Actually, there are other groups that tried this type of treatment in complete injuries as well. For now, the only limit is the traumatic spinal cord injury. Other kind of spinal cord disorders like infectious diseases, autoimmune diseases, we did not try it yet.
And how long do you suppose it would take for an experimental treatment like this to be approved and used in practice?
Right now, there is a multi-center, multinational study ongoing to get better results, to get more results for safety and efficacy. So at the end of this study, we are expecting this will be available in clinical setting in 3 to 5 years, maybe less.
That's amazing. And one question we have, I think our final question is, the videos that have been shown only show movement gain in the arms. Is there stimulation protocols that work for other parts of the body?
Yes. Actually, there is an ongoing study in our laboratory to understand the therapeutic effect of this kind of stimulation for locomotor function, for walking function. The other groups also studied this and showed very promising positive results that transcutaneous stimulation can improve walking as well. Also, this type of treatment is used for improving bladder functions, also for cardiovascular functions. These are all ongoing studies, and we are expecting to show stronger evidence soon at the end of these studies.
And it looks like we've gotten one more question. Have any patients made a complete recovery with this treatment?
Actually, we do not expect at that time a complete recovery or reversal of the paralysis, but improvement in function, organ functions, sensory motor function will add a lot to the people who have this kind of paralysis. As I told during my presentation, even small improvements means a lot for the people with spinal cord injury. So I cannot say that at that moment, this will completely cure the spinal cord injury.
Thank you so much. I think that's all of our questions.
Thank you so much for listening to me and for the great questions you asked.
Wonderful.
A round of applause to Dr. Inanici for her stimulating presentation. We are so thrilled to be able to hear about your work and are very excited to see what the future holds for spinal cord therapy. Now we'll be moving on to Synaptech's presentation.
Hi, everyone. I want to thank Green Matters for inviting us, Synaptech, to come speak and show off some cool neurotech. So today we'll be showing off a little demo to measure engagement through brain correlations. So my name is Toma Itagaki. I'm an undergraduate here at the UW studying neuroscience, and this is...
And I'm Pierre Karashchuk, a neuroscience PhD student.
So a little bit more about Synaptech. We're a club at the UW focused on introducing neurotech and this concept of neuroengineering to people of all disciplines. And we host workshops and events where our members get to sort of test out and work with different kinds of neurotech and neural data. So if you're interested, please check us out. We'll have contact information at the end. So what I'm wearing today on my head is a piece of neurotechnology. So what neurotech is some sort of technology that captures neural activity. That can be anything from electrical signals to blood flow. And so we'll use this data to perform some sort of analysis so that we can understand our brains better. What I'm wearing on my head is OpenBCI, which is a company, their EEG system, and we'll be measuring and recording electrical signals from my brain. So how an EEG works is that whenever I think of something, whenever I move, whenever the brain is active, populations of neurons in the brain will fire, and therefore it creates this voltage potential. And so what I have here is one of my channels. I have 8 of these on my head right now, but these are touching my scalp, and it's recording the voltage potential difference. So what we'll use that kind of recording, that electrical signal, to compare my engagement when I watch a video. So here is a standardization of where to record from the brain in terms of EEGs. So here we see a bunch of codes indicating where on the head these EEG channels are located. And so if you can see here in this diagram of the brain, the colors of these loosely correlate with where in the brain it's recording from. So one thing about the frontal lobe is that it has this thing called the prefrontal cortex, which is related to tasks like decision making. And so if you were a scientist looking to collect data or do a research project on understanding how humans make decisions, then you would want to record electrical activity from the frontal lobe. Similarly, if you wanted to test out or record visual stimulus, the response to visual stimulus, then you would want to record from the part of the brain that processes visual information. And even though the eye is in the front of the head, visual stimulus is recorded in the occipital lobe, which is at the back of the head. But today, because we want to get a more holistic capturing of my brain activity while I watch the video, so we want to, this isn't specific, but we want to know, the visual processing as well as like the auditory or me understanding the video. I've scattered the channels throughout my head, and so we'll get a more generalized recording of the brain activity.
So the way the experiment will work is based on this concept of brain correlations. And so what happens is when 2 people pay attention to the same video, as in here, 2 people are paying attention to the same video of some penguins, their brain is driven by the stimulus and generally responds in this similar way. And so their brain activity throughout their brain is going to be correlated. They'll have similar neural activity. However, if 2 people, if their thoughts wander, for instance, if one person thinks about cheesecake and another person thinks about aliens, then their brain will respond in different ways, and the activity of the neurons in their brain will respond differently. And so their brains will not be correlated. And so using this, neuroscientists have placed people in the same room watching the same movie, and if people are engaged, their brains are going to be correlated. So here you can see on the x-axis is the correlation of people's neural activity from the EEG. And on the y-axis is how much of the trailer that they saw that people could recall on average. And you can see that overall there's a trend. So for whenever the brains are more correlated, they could actually recall more of the trailer later on. So for instance, in the top right, you can see there's the trailer of X-Men. The people had a relatively high correlation. The trailer really engaged them. They could recall more of the trailer later on. Whereas for Mr. Peabody and Sherman at the lower left, they could recall much less of the trailer, and their brains were much less correlated. And similarly, this could be used to predict ticket sales for movies, just with the same system. This is how you might apply this. Another example of using brain synchrony, these brain correlations, is in this other study where scientists put EEG headsets on a bunch of students and a teacher in a classroom, and they were measuring the similarity between the teacher's neural activity and the students. And they found that the correlation between the student and the teacher activity predicted the engagement ratings of the students after the class. So there's something about how similar the responses of the teacher and the student that correlated with this engagement.
So today I'll do a little demo, but the main objective is to show the correlation across two recordings. So what we'll do is I'll show a video, and I'll watch the video while my headset captures my electrical activity. And I've also recorded a set of data beforehand. And so what we'll do is load that data into Python, which is a coding language, but we'll compare the two sets of recordings to produce a correlation plot. So it'll show us when in the video I had a high correlation between the two recordings. So today we'll be watching a trailer of a movie. It's an open source project by Blender. It's called Spinal. But we'll watch the movie together. And what I want everyone to do is sort of take note of where in the movie got you engaged. So this could be hints to figure out why I had high correlation between the two recordings. You know, if the movie had characteristic background music, or there was an introduction of a new character, these could be places where I was engaged with the movie in both recordings. And if that's the case, we would see a high correlation in our correlation plot. But before that, what I want to do is I want to show you guys the raw data, the raw EEG stream that is going to capture our neural activity.
So here, Toma will start setting up the headset, and he's going to set it up to stream the data, the voltages from the electrodes on his head, convert it into numbers on his computer. So he started the streaming. In another terminal, he's going to open up a visualization of this activity. So here it is, and each of these lines that you see in the graph represents one of the electrodes on his head. And they are measuring the voltage level from his scalp. And yeah.
So here's my neural data. Unfortunately, it seems like 2 of the channels aren't recording. But just to sort of understand what this is showing, these are the channel names that we saw in the slideshow. So FP1, FP2 represent a channel that's on my forehead. And so if you can see, it might be small, but I have 2 channels on my forehead that's recording. But one cool thing I can do is I can show you the muscle activity when I blink. So I want you guys to focus on the blue and orange plots. So when I blink, there's a little dip and a little peak, and this is recording our muscle activity of my forehead when I blink. So we'll be using this data while I watch the video, and then we'll compare that to a recording that I did beforehand. But I'm going to restart the stream just to make sure all the channels are working. Oops.
So in one terminal, Toma is streaming the data. In another terminal, he's command line window, he's recording the data, and here he's gonna watch the movie in the final.
What brings you to the land of the gatekeepers?
I'm searching for someone.
A dangerous quest for a lone hunter.
I've been alone for as long as I can remember.
All right, so now we got that recording. We'll load this data into our notebook. So what we'll do now is first look at one of the channel recordings for the EEG. So as we saw in that EEG stream with 8 channels, this is a representation of the EEG recording across the 52 seconds that I showed for the video. And this is channel 4, but we can see that on the y-axis, we have the voltage recording in microvolts, and then we see it fluctuate. But what we're interested in is not just a single channel, but all 8 channels together to represent my brain activity. So now what we'll do is we'll combine the recording for the 8 channels for recording 1 and recording 2, and we'll create the correlation plot between the 2. And we'll look for places in the movie where I had high engagement in both recordings. So here is our correlation plot. So on the x-axis, this represents time. So 0 represents the start of the movie when I press enter. And we see it span across around 52 seconds. And then on the y-axis, we see the correlation. So we want the correlation to be higher when we say that we were engaged in the same thing. And so we'll look for some of the peaks in this plot. So we see here, this one's a pretty characteristic peak. So what we'll do is now look at some of the features of the video that we showed to see if we can sort of associate what led us to have what led me to have high engagement with the movie trailer at that time. So just a brief estimate, this could be around 18 seconds. So I've loaded some of the frames from the video, and it seems like 18 seconds was just a black screen. So whatever I was thinking or however I was engaging with the movie at 18 seconds, this could have been with the sound as well, but the brain activity was similar across the first recording and the second. We can see here, just after 40 seconds, we see another peak. So let's check that out. So here, it seems like this is when the Synaptech text came out. So this could be an indication that I engaged with this text in the movie in a similar way. So it could have been the activity of me reading the word Syntel that could have been similar. But of course, we have to really consider how holistic the brain activity is. So let's now look at the correlation plot together with the sound data. So here, the red plot shows our correlation. So this is the same plot that we saw up here. But now I've overlaid the sound data. So what I've done is I've taken the sound from the trailer, and we can see there are characteristic differences in the sound plot. So this is when the old dude starts talking to the girl, but we don't really see that much correlation. But here, let's see, this is around 18 seconds again. So this is likely the end of when the old dude was talking. So there could have been some music that prompted me to engage with the movie in a similar way. And here at the end, when the music sort of ramps up to a dramatic end, you see high correlation. So this could have been due to my engagement with the audio from the movie. And so we can use this kind of analysis to sort of think about how we engage with media. This demo was actually inspired by studies that looked at how we engage with stories. And if you want to learn more about this, you can search up Yuri Hassan, who's a neuroscientist who studies brain correlations. But one of the really cool studies was across fMRI recordings. So it wasn't EEG, across fMRI recordings between two people who listened to the same story in two different languages. There was high brain correlation. So this indicates that with when told like a story that has the same meaning, but told in a different medium through a different language, we still see brain correlation, which could indicate that we process these stories or we process information in similar ways, regardless of the medium in which it's told. And if you guys are interested, here's the GitHub link to today's demo. You'll need a headset, but if you want to look at how the data is analyzed or some of the more specific recording techniques that we use, you can check it out here. But yeah, Synaptech is always welcoming members, and we have a couple of events coming up. So if you're interested in learning more about Synaptech, we have an info session next week. We're also looking for more applicants for officer positions. And we'll be hosting a mini hackathon, our Synaptech Hack Jam, which is open to everyone. You don't need to know how to do anything, but we'll be hosting a couple of workshops to help you get started with capturing brain data, analyzing that. And so hopefully we'll see some of you guys come to our Synaptech event. We have a question from the chat. How would you improve the signals taken from an EEG? I know that staying still is an important factor. Are there any other things the patient or researcher can do?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a great question. And indeed, staying still is an important factor. I think if Toma moves a little bit, you actually get quite a bit of noise in the EEG. Another factor that's important is just the electrical interference all around us. All the electronics that we have in the United States work at 60 hertz oscillation frequency. So usually if you touch a laptop or you touch a computer, really anything electronic that's connected to the power, you get this kind of interference. So a lot of research grade EEG studies are actually done in like sealed Faraday cages rooms that have very little electrical interference from the world. Yeah, the other thing is to minimize not just general movement, but minimize, eye blinks, jaw clenches, general muscle activity on the head, because as we saw, that causes artifacts. Yeah.
So we have another question. Are there many practical uses for this technology beyond research or information gathering, such as in medical care? I can start. So I think neurotech is super fascinating, and although EEG isn't the best technique to get neural information, there are different techniques that are being used in the medical field. So if you implant a brain-computer interface in a patient who needs a prosthetic, there's a lot of research and development in that kind of prosthetic control using our brain. And this idea of neuroplasticity, really helps these devices and the brain restore function in lost limbs and stuff like that. But these consumer grade EEGs can be used to do a lot of things. There's a big community that's trying to develop games or a method of controlling video games through brain data. So that's something that's really cool. And other wearables focus on improving and like understanding the quality of sleep or meditation. So that can be something that the EEG is good for.
Yeah. I'd also like to add for EEG, since these devices can be much easier to sit on and much more portable. So you saw Toma kind of just put on the headset. And some headsets are even easier. You really just slide it on. It can make it easier to have. It's a way to access the brain data, perhaps for early diagnostics. So if people are looking into, for instance, early diagnosis of Alzheimer's based on the signals that people have in their brain when they see certain stimuli on the computer. You might imagine that it's much easier to just bring an EEG headset to somebody than maybe bring them to a hospital.
If this technology is indeed used in medical care, what are some specific ways in which medical professionals apply this data in patient care? So again, I saw this really cool study where they used this open BCI EEG to detect early, I believe it was schizophrenia. And so this neural data although isn't the most explored, it has really powerful information.
There's some, yeah, I guess while we're mentioning studies, you can actually, here the electrodes are on the head, but you can you can use the same headset thing and just put the electrodes on the stomach and measure the electrical signals that the stomach generates as it contracts and expands when you're digesting food. And you can actually diagnose indigestion in this way.
You mentioned that it was important to think about how the brain processes holistically. So what do you think the advantage is of pinpointing higher levels of engagement at certain locations? So today we looked at brain correlation in like the overall brain activity, but let's say we were trying to decipher whether two recordings were looking at the same thing, then you could pinpoint the occipital lobe and really gather the neural activity in the occipital lobe where the visual stimulus is processed to get a better sense of visual processing. But today, since we're looking at how my brain responds, like in a very general sense, including all these aspects like information processing, visual processing, and auditory processing, I scattered the channels. And then, do you think the bigger future advancements in EEG will come mostly from hardware, mostly software/signal processing, or a combination of both? I think that both advancements in hardware and analysis technique is very important. But I also think that we need a lot more research to understand what the brain specifically does. So right now, raw computational power can help us learn about the brain or sort of associate certain recordings with certain behaviors, but sometimes there isn't enough research in neuroscience to connect the two. And so if there's a way, there's definitely a need for more research in every field of neuroscience to really understand the brain.
Yeah, there's definitely one thing that neuroscience can bring, I think, for EEG specifically, is there are actually other ways to record from the brain, especially neuroscientists can actually insert electrodes within the brain or have kind of a grid right on top of the brain. And one thing that could be interesting is to record both EEG and this intracranial signal to try to, once you understand the signals underneath, you might see like a specific pattern of activity. The pattern of activity within the EEG will be like much more blurry because it has to pass through the skull first. But if you know what the pattern looks like, you might be able to look for it much better within this like more noisy EEG signal. And yeah, and I think
all right.
the EEG.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, there are actually a lot of EEG headsets coming out recently, and yeah, I guess just to end it, that we actually have we've started to buy a lot of the EEG headsets that are coming out. So definitely, if you're interested, come by to Synaptech, come by to our Hack Jam where you can actually rent out the hardware if you're in the Seattle area. We'll deliver it to you for a weekend and hang out with us.
All right. Thank you guys all for listening and watching our little Neurotech demo. We really want you to engage with Neurotech. So please come out to some of our events. And thank you all for the great questions.
Thank you to Toma and Pierre for your fantastic demonstration. We at Gray Matters look forward to continued collaboration with Synaptech.
Feel free, all of our to submit further questions in the comments, and we'll do our best to arrange answers for you. It's a privilege to be able to put on an event for such an engaged audience.
These events are for you, so your feedback is important to us. Please fill out your feedback at tiny.cc/EWN feedback. Everyone who fills it out will be entered into the raffle. You can continue to submit questions for future events at tiny.cc/EWN ask.
In addition, our event this year features a Gray Matters Journal scavenger hunt at tiny.cc/EWN hunt. Answer 10 out of 20 questions to win some free EWN stickers.
We look forward to seeing you next week at 5 p.m. for a brain dissection. Wishing you a wonderful Friday evening.
Thanks, everyone.